Hatred is a strange thing. It grows in silence, it grows in confusion, and it grows in the absence of truth. For 30 years, I lived with it. I fed it. I believed it gave me strength. I thought it made me clearer, more righteous, more certain. But what I didn't see, what I refused to see, was that it was destroying me from within. I believed I had reasons. My upbringing, my environment, the voices I listened to, all crafted this illusion that I was justified. But hatred never justifies, it only corrupts. I remember being a boy and hearing the casual comments, the dismissive looks, the whispers of suspicion. Muslims were the other. Different. Not us. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I absorbed it. Not through evidence, not through reason, but through atmosphere. Through silence where truth should have spoken. And then, as I grew older, I wrapped that inherited fear in my own opinions. I began to shape it into something that felt intelligent. I read selectively, I listened selectively, I argued with anyone who questioned my bias. I built a fortress of certainty around a core of ignorance. Hatred often masquerades as clarity. It tells you that you know, that you understand, that you've figured it out. And the scariest thing, it feels good. It gives you a target. It simplifies the world. It creates a convenient enemy. It lets you believe that all your pain, your confusion, your disappointment, someone else is responsible for it. That's the seduction. Hatred offers identity without the burden of self-examination. And for decades, I accepted that offer. Until one day, without warning, that identity cracked. It didn't happen in a debate. It didn't happen through a book. It happened in a moment of need. A real moment. Not abstract. Not ideological. A moment where my life was slipping away, literally, and the only hand reaching out to help was a Muslim. And in that moment, the entire structure of my belief system began to collapse. Because when you are dying, when you are vulnerable, when the lies in your head are confronted by the truth of reality, then you see clearly. And what I saw was not my enemy. I saw a human being. A man with fear in his eyes, but compassion in his actions. A man who didn't hesitate. Who didn't ask my background. Who didn't ask my opinion. He simply acted with courage and kindness. It is difficult to overstate how shattering that moment was. Everything I thought I knew about them, all the stereotypes, the caricatures, the poison I had consumed and repeated, was undone in an instant. And what came next wasn't peace. It was grief. Grief for the years I had wasted. Grief for the relationships I had poisoned. Grief for the version of myself that I had constructed out of fear. Jordan Peterson often says, "Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world." That quote haunted me after that experience. Because I had spent 30 years criticizing, accusing, blaming, while my own house was burning from the inside. I had built no order. I had faced no chaos within myself. I had taken no responsibility for the narratives I carried. I had been a coward. And in that cowardice, I had embraced ideology over truth. Identity over humanity. The next months were brutal. Self-awareness is not a gentle companion. It holds up a mirror, and it doesn't blink. I had to unlearn not only what I believed, but who I thought I was. And that is terrifying. When you realize that your identity is a house of cards, you feel like you're dying a second time. But that death, unlike the one I almost faced physically, is the kind that gives birth to a new life. I began to study, not with the aim to confirm my biases, but to challenge them. I listened to voices I had mocked. I read perspectives I had rejected. I opened myself to truths that made me uncomfortable. And slowly, I realized, the problem was never them. It was always me. My unwillingness to see, to question, to empathize. Jordan Peterson talks about speaking the truth and taking responsibility. For the first time in my life, I understood what that meant. It meant not hiding behind labels. It meant looking at my past and owning it. Not just the facts of it, but the consequences. The people I hurt. The poison I spread. The children I influenced. The damage I did, not because I was evil, but because I was blind. And then I asked myself, how many others are still blind? And what can I do to change that? Truth is not comfortable. Growth is not gentle. And forgiveness is not easy. But all of it is possible. I met with the man who saved me. I thanked him. And then I listened. Really listened. To his story. His fears. His faith. His humanity. And I realized, we are far more alike than different. Our fears echo each other. Our hopes resonate. Our pain is shared. And when you begin to see that, something extraordinary happens. The walls you build in your mind begin to fall. And in their place, bridges can form. The road back to truth is long. But every step is worth it. Because on that road, you find meaning. You find purpose. You find your soul. Hatred can be loud, but truth is persistent. And once you hear it, you can never unhear it. You just have to be brave enough to listen. I began to wonder how many others lived like I had, trapped in their own hatred, feeding off half-truths, assumptions, and cultural echoes. I had to ask myself the difficult question, if someone like me could change, what would it take for others? And the answer wasn't found in shouting facts or debating statistics, it was found in real human connection. That was the truth Jordan Peterson spoke of repeatedly, not just abstract truth, but lived truth. Truth that shakes you awake, that pulls you from your ideological slumber and demands that you confront yourself. And confronting yourself is far more terrifying than confronting any external enemy. My entire value system had to be restructured. I used to believe strength meant dominance, that conviction meant stubbornness, and that certainty was a virtue. I discovered instead that real strength is the ability to listen, that conviction must be tempered with humility, and that certainty without truth is just arrogance in disguise. There was a time when I felt proud to say I had never wavered in my beliefs. Now I see that as a tragic confession. To never question your beliefs is to never grow. And I had spent too many years worshipping my own rigidity. The man who saved me didn't just pull me from physical danger, he rescued me from a spiritual prison. And he didn't even know it. That's the part that haunts me. While I was living in judgment, he was living in service. While I was fueling division, he was practicing compassion. And I began to ask, what kind of world are we building if we reward fear and punish understanding? What does it say about us if we'd rather cling to comfortable lies than be challenged by uncomfortable truths? Jordan Peterson often warns against the seduction of resentment. And I know now exactly what he means. Resentment is addictive. It gives you a story where you're always the victim and never the culprit. But resentment blinds you. It robs you of your ability to see others clearly. It poisons your relationships, your worldview, your very sense of self. And the moment you let go of resentment, you don't just free the other person, you free yourself. I reached out to others in the Muslim community. I started attending interfaith gatherings. Not as a gesture of penance, but as a genuine pursuit of truth. I wanted to see, to understand, to listen, not through the lens of otherness, but through the shared human experience. And what I found again and again was warmth, curiosity, dignity. The same values I had claimed to uphold all my life, yet had denied in others. That contradiction had to die within me. And it did, slowly, painfully, beautifully. You see, we often talk about changing the world, but very few of us are willing to change ourselves. We want others to evolve, to wake up, to apologize. But transformation begins within. It begins with the question, what am I refusing to see? That question led me to the darkest corners of my mind. And in those corners, I found not monsters, but wounds. Wounds from childhood, from fear, from disappointment. I realized my hatred was never really about Muslims. It was about me, my insecurity, my pain, my desperate need for someone to blame. That realization crushed me. Because it stripped away every justification I had built for my prejudice. And in its place, it left only vulnerability. But that vulnerability was the soil in which healing began. And in that healing, I began to see people as people, not labels, not threats, not ideologies, but souls. Complex, struggling, beautiful souls. And when you see someone as a soul, hatred becomes impossible. You can disagree, you can debate, but you cannot hate. Not once you've seen the humanity behind the surface. Jordan Peterson emphasizes the power of taking individual responsibility. Not collective guilt, not abstract blame, but personal accountability. I had to take responsibility for the version of myself I had become. And then, I had to work, day by day, thought by thought, to build something better. Something more honest. Something more compassionate. And that process was, and still is, the hardest thing I've ever done. Because it requires constant vigilance. It requires me to challenge my impulses, to examine my motives, to ask, is this thought rooted in truth, or in fear? Every time I'm tempted to retreat into my old worldview, I remember the hand that pulled me out of danger. I remember the face of the man I once called enemy, and now call brother. I remember that truth is not a weapon to wield against others, but a mirror to hold up to yourself. And I ask myself, am I living in accordance with truth, or am I hiding behind another story? Stories matter. The stories we tell ourselves shape our reality. I had lived for decades inside a toxic story, one in which I was noble, and they were dangerous. That story was a lie. And when it broke, I didn't just lose a narrative, I lost a part of my identity. But in that loss, I gained something far greater, clarity. And with clarity comes responsibility. Now, When I hear someone echo the beliefs I once held, I don't attack. I ask. I listen. I try to understand what pain is behind their hatred. Because no one wakes up one day and decides to hate. It's a process. A slow erosion of empathy, often fueled by fear. And if hatred is learned, then understanding can be learned too. That is the hope. That is the mission. I tell this story not because I want praise. I don't deserve it. I tell it because someone out there might be where I once was, trapped, angry, sure of their rightness but unaware of their blindness. And if my words can shake their certainty, if they can provoke even one moment of self-reflection, then that's enough. Because one moment of truth can begin a lifetime of transformation. Jordan Peterson once said, "You should be a monster, and then learn to control it." I know now what that means. The monster is not the capacity for aggression, it's the capacity for hate, for self-deception, for moral cowardice. And controlling that monster doesn't mean pretending it's not there. It means facing it, understanding it, and choosing something better. In the end, the man who saved me didn't just rescue my life, he rescued my soul. And he did it without knowing, without expectation, without judgment. That is the kind of strength I now aspire to. Not the strength of domination, but the strength of compassion. Not the pride of certainty, but the humility of growth. Not the echo of hatred, but the voice of truth. That is what it means to hear God clearly, not through the noise of ideology, not through the fog of fear, but through the still, quiet voice of conscience. Through the truth that pierces your comfort and calls you to something higher. Through the love that reaches across boundaries, across labels, across decades of division. I spent 30 years building walls. But in one moment, one man tore them down. And now, I build bridges.